Ian Duncan, Conservative MEP for Scotland. Norway has decided to catch more than its decided share of blue whiting. What impact might that now have on Scotland?
Well, there's two things. There's a question of fairness. It isn't fair for any member state simply to increase its share of the quota. And the second thing is this will have knock-on consequences for the sustainability of the stock. And the important thing we have to get here is equity and sustainability. And what the Norwegians are doing destroys both.
I mean, we went through that whole scenario over the mackerel crisis when Iceland and the Faroe Islands started catching a lot more than was their due. Is this looking like it could go in the same direction? Is there worrying signs here which will impact on the Scottish fleet?
Well, this is surprising to me. We stood shoulder to shoulder with the Norwegians over the question of mackerel and the Icelandic Titanic fishery. And now we find ourselves with the Norwegians declaring to us that their share of 25% must be increased to 40% because that's their due. Well, that's pot and kettle here. You can't condemn the Icelandics for behaving in a certain fashion and then do exactly the same thing yourself and not expect to be condemned by us. This is unacceptable and this must stop.
How important are these international agreements where the European Union, which of course includes Scotland, the UK and others, get round the table with Norway, Iceland and so forth? How important are those talks? And therefore, if yet another country is undermining those talks, how much of a concern is that?
Well, these agreements are how we allocate the entitlement to catch fish in the sea. Simple as that. If you start then to undermine that, the confidence is lost. And the whole point is we should be making sure that our agreements ensure we have sustainable fisheries and equitable fishing rights. Norway is behaving badly. It's undermining equity and it's potentially destroying sustainability.
If it's undermining sustainability as well, does that mean that the Scottish fleet are going to ultimately have to start thinking about cutting back on how much they can catch, unless at risk of putting the stock at risk unless someone starts catching less if Norwegians are catching more?
Well, this is what I put to the Commissioner, and I said, Commissioner Vella, you must now take action. It isn't enough to simply condemn and say, isn't it dreadful, isn't it awful? Get it sorted out. Scottish fishermen run the risk of suffering through a collapse in the fishery and simply a loss of entitlement. We have a European Union here who are meant to be acting. They would claim that they are the custodians of the sea. Well, show it. Get acting, get it sorted, get Norway to the table and say to them, unless you resolve this matter now, then the agreements with which you think you are entitled, they're off the table. The right to fish in our waters, that's off the table. Let's show the muscle that this European Union should have in fisheries negotiations.
And briefly to wrap up, at what stage does this get critical? How long can this keep going without the EU taking some kind of enforcement action?
Well, we all know how long it takes for the EU to grind into gear. We need to start acting today. And that's why I will be calling upon Commissioner Vella once again to act, not to talk about acting. We've got to make sure now that by the end of the year we have certainty back into the blue whiting fishery and confidence among the Scottish fishing fleet.